It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Elliott Dacher, who's a physician, board certified in internal medicine, trained at the State University in New York Medical School, also at the Michael Reese Clinic in Chicago, was also at the Harvard Medical School where he did some training. He was a fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, practiced clinical medicine from 1975 to 1995, and went beyond his training, which is one of the things I like about Elliott. He did meditation, yoga, imagery, biofeedback, and really focused on self-healing and on self-regulation. He's authored a number of books. Ones you might have heard of are Integral Health, The Path of Flourishing, and his other book, Whole Healing. He's got a new book coming out. What was it? What's your new book, Elliott?
It's called Aware, Awake, and Alive.
Okay.
A contemporary guide to the ancient practices of integral health and human flourishing.
Excellent. I like that title, and we'll get to it in just a minute. And really, a lot of your life has been spent looking at the integral nature of how the world and how the universe works. When we talk about integral healing, which is one of your big things, what does that mean to you?
Well, what it means to me is what's obvious is that all of us are composed of multiple parts, so to say. I mean, we're really a whole. So if we divide up our human experience, we come up with our mind, or a psychosocial experience, spiritual experience, our body, our biology, our interpersonal relationships, and our relationship to culture, to work, to society. These are kind of the four major aspects of our life, and all of them contribute to health and disease. So to have an integral approach is really to be willing to look at all of these aspects of health and healing. And as I wrote about this, and after I wrote about it, it became really increasingly evident to me that in our time, the really important area is our own psychospiritual development. Two reasons why. First, because it's completely undeveloped, or well undeveloped in Western society. And second, because it drives all the other things. I mean, you really can't have a great intimate relationship or a loving kindness and open heart for others unless you really have cultivated a sense of otherness in your heart and in your mind. And the same in one's relationship to to society in general. You can't see work from a selfless or more serving point of view unless you've developed your consciousness. And the higher levels of mind-body self-regulation really require higher, more subtle levels of consciousness. So my interest shifted towards that aspect of the integral model, which kind of drives the rest of it.
It's a beautiful way to look at things. It's kind of a holistic way of looking at things, because it's not just about us as individuals, and it really points out, I think, the difference between a dualistic way of looking at things and a more unified way of the oneness of the universe. And I think you spent a lot of time exploring that.
I did. After my years of practice, I spent about 10 to 12 years going back and forth to the East to learn Eastern practices.
So you went to India?
India, Nepal, Eastern practices, Eastern psychology and philosophy, and what that could shed and how it could complement the kinds of practices and ideas I learned in the West. And when you put them both together, you sort of have the best of both worlds, because we've mastered the biology and how to take care of our body, and they have done an awful lot of work mastering the mind. And the mind is where happiness takes place and where suffering takes place. So if we don't understand the mind and how to work with it, we really can't work with suffering, and we really can't create enduring happiness.
You know, we talk a lot about holism, and I think a lot of it centers on, we're looking at how love fits into the package. And to me, it gets simplified in a way where love becomes the basis of what we're trying to connect with and operate that way. It takes us into the moment deeply, and it takes us into a place where we're more wanting to give than we are to receive. When we talk about integral care, do you use that word in that way?
Well, the best definition I actually found for the word love is one that I found in the East, and that's that love is wanting the other person to be happy. It's really quite simple. It's got nothing to do with relationship. It's got nothing to do with emotions or feeling. It's really saying, look, all of us want to be happy. You want to be happy. I want to be happy. We're all equal in that desire to be happy. And if I focus on your happiness, the reality is that's really going to bring more happiness to me. So a great Indian teacher said, you know, all the suffering in the world comes from my wanting myself to be happy, and all the happiness in the world comes from my wanting others to be happy. So I found for myself just using that reminder all the time that if I care about this person, or even someone I don't care about, my inner desire for them to have happiness in their life, as I wish it for myself, is my way of loving.
You live your life that way. We just had a long talk, and I know that that's a fundamental principle that spurs you on. You want to be the change that you see as one that's to the advantage of the community. And it's what takes you to a place where you are walking your talk. And yet, when we look at Western culture and the way it operates, it's more centered on what can I get. It's about narcissism. It's about being separate. It's about competing. It's about being better than. What do we need to learn in this country or in this world to be able to make that transition to the next level?
Well, we need to really come to terms with the fact that that's really a cause of suffering, not a cause of happiness. Because until we really understand the external pleasures, ambition, fame, name, relationship that we spend so much of our energy going towards, until we really understand what we're doing is chasing suffering, not happiness, we end up chasing the wrong thing. And yes, we have moments of pleasure, moments of happiness that come, but they're transient. Because all things come, all things go, all things change. What I have changes, what I want changes. And so that there is no way to sustain happiness through the external search for these things. When we really begin to look back on our own lives and at life in general and see that there is no sustainable quality of happiness in any of these things. So a car, it may give us a moment of pleasure, but that pleasure isn't inherent in the car.
Right.
10 minutes later, it may give us displeasure if we get into a crash.
Right.
So when we begin to really get the fact that we're chasing after suffering, when we go for these externalities, that's when we begin to give it up. And simultaneously we find tastes of that happiness and peace and contentness inside that is enduring. It's not dependent on anything outside. And so it's permanent. And we have control over it, so to say. When we begin to get those understandings, it begins to change naturally by itself.
Well, if we can just realize that at a deep level and appreciate it, because what we've done for thousands of years is we made changes in the cultures that we live in by revolution. And so we don't like what's happened. We overthrow the particular people that are in power, and new people with seemingly good intentions take over, and the next thing you know is there's another revolution. And we've done revolution after revolution after revolution. But it seems to me that we need to do more of something like evolving to a higher level of consciousness. And there are lots of challenges to that hold us in check. I mean, when we live in the world today, if you're giving your heart and your material possessions away, those possessions will disappear in a tenth of a second, and you'll be in a position where you can't take care of yourself so well. So how do we go about evolving? Do you think it's by personal example? Is it a teaching that needs to be learned? Is it a religion of some kind? How do you see the next evolutionary step happening?
Well, first thing we have to do is become quiet. Unless one is a little bit quiet inside, it's really impossible to hear or understand anything about one's life through the noise. It just can't happen. So all great traditions, all great religious and philosophical traditions, and the shamanic traditions, the native traditions, all of them will emphasize periods of retreat, of quiet, that are organized in the way to gain a familiarity with one's inner life, and to quiet down the noise so it's naturally there within us begins to give us a sense of truth, a sense of wisdom. Greek answers would speak about human flourishing as being the ability to know the truth of life, to see the goodness of life, and to experience the beauty in existence. And this is really what we're aiming for. And so this all requires an inner quietness. So it's the place to begin, whether that's meditation, or that's what's called incubation in the ancient Greek tradition, or whether that's prayer, or whether that's retreat. There has to be some taking a space to just listen more deeply inside.
I think that's beautiful. And one of the things I really like about what you're doing is you're offering these teachings to people who are in the medical field. So when we're looking at trying to coach people who are in the medical profession and to teach them this, what do you see happening? What are the next steps? How will you personally be involved in that?
Well, I think what's important is for healers, particularly healers, to take some time for themselves, to get away from their practice. You know, all the great stories have stories of really retreat. If you take the story in the Bible where Christ goes into the desert for 40 days to deal with the temptations, to deal with his mind, to deal with his soul. Here's a great healer taking 40 days off. Now, there are a lot of people that aren't being healed during that period of time. But he comes back and he's able to break the fish into 1,000 pieces and the bread and so on. Now, there's stories like that in every tradition.
Sure.
So this time away, whether it's called a vision quest or incubation or retreat, is really essential. And we have to just realize it's part of our teaching experience. So as physicians or other healers, we're used to taking time for CMEs, for credits. We get self-education. And that's accepted, that's legitimized. But we don't take the time to really go inside and take retreat as being a continuing medical education in ourselves. So there needs to be first that break.
So we have a chance here of using education to further where we are in terms of looking at our values in life and how we're going to change the world so that it's a place that is more about giving and sharing and loving than it is about us as individuals. So I want to thank you, Elliott, for participating in this and sharing some of your views about the integral nature of the universe and how it fits into healing. Because I think that's where the future of humanity is. It's where our salvation is. It's where we have some kind of opportunity to make the world a better place and to evolve to a higher level of consciousness. So thanks again.
Great. Delight being with you.